It's 7:30 a.m. on July 13, 2095, and I'm still on the air from the high-rise above Figueroa Street. Daylight has pulled a thin curtain over the city, but the shape underneath hasn't changed. Smoke columns lean with the morning breeze. Drone arcs track the grid lines like compass needles, and the streets below look stalled in the middle of a held breath. We are 14 and a half hours into the first nationwide suspension of law and emergency protection, or the Purge. I have a composite dashboard open in front of me that overlays last night's power kills with the city's water pressure map, traffic camera reboots, and cell handshake logs from towers that never fully went offline. The lines braid together. The same corridors that went dark at 8:00 p.m. show pressure drops at 9:10 p.m. and again at 11:42 p.m. And right now those corridors are where my thermal feeds show the highest movement. Someone designed the night to make funnels. If you are in Los Angeles and you are hearing my voice, the most dangerous streets are the ones that look quiet and recently burned out. Those are the paths where the models push you. If you have to move, do it along irregular routes, narrow drives between buildings, parking ramp switchbacks, interior hallways with 2 exits, and stay below the windows. I have LAX up on 4 panes. Daylight makes it look less like a terminal and more like a logistics yard. The private side, on the Imperial Highway approach east of the big international concourse, is stacked with unmarked vans and minibuses nosed in beneath the jetways. I can make out groups offloading hard cases and long rifle bags straight onto the curb. The security lane that used to funnel ride shares is now a queue for shuttles with out-of-state plates. A pair of small business jets rolled to a stop 15 minutes apart without transponder tags I can verify. Passengers stepped onto the tarmac with helmets clipped to their belts and moved into the vans without anyone checking anything. The public statement 3 days ago said inbound screening would remain in force until the Purge window opened. The camera says otherwise. Closer to me, just west of 7th and Flower, the night software made a mistake. I watched a black uniformed detachment breach a corporate tower at 6:58 a.m. after their tablet flagged the floor as a hostile node. They came in clean and quiet, stacking the door, pushing past the lobby bollards, then took fire from a private detail that had been told their staff shelter was protected. That was the first blue-on-black engagement I've seen in daylight. The feed shows 2 contractors backing down the stairwell, and a visor cam shaking as someone yells for a model refresh. The hallway went still after that. I don't see the detachment anymore. I do see a cart on its side with a portable jammer knocked half out of its case, and a tablet open to a map with colored blocks that match last night's optimization corridors. Once the tools slip, it stops looking like policy and starts looking like error. I'm going to take one call before the floor maintenance team returns to my level. Shortwave only. No names. You're live. The voice is steady and tired. She says she's a nurse at County USC, triage level, East Wing. They have 3 wards lit by battery packs and a gym full of cots. The stairwells were chained at midnight to keep crowds from overrunning the 2nd floor. But someone cut a second access at 3:00 a.m., and now families are sleeping on the landings. She says they're treating electric burns from strobe platforms and something she calls low oxygen syncope. People dropping after a pulse with shallow breathing, stable but unresponsive for hours. They stopped trying to call ambulances after the 3rd hour. The only medicine moving in the building is on carts, with volunteers pushing through dark hallways with headlamps. She asks if there are safe routes south to the 10. I tell her no. The ramps are blocked and the shoulders are kill funnels. I tell her to stay where she is and keep the stair doors chained. She thanks me, and the line goes quiet. Another push just landed on my secure terminal. A superintendent from the West Side Water Yard confirms what I saw in the pressure map. They closed valves along a zigzag line from mid-city to the edge of downtown a little after 10:00 p.m. The order came with a regional seal and a guarantee that it was a protective distribution measure. By closing those valves, the hydrants along that line went dry, and anything that burned in those blocks burned unopposed. He says crews argued and were told to stand down. He says 2 of them took a suspension on the spot when they tried to reopen the gate at La Brea after midnight. I ask him to document what he can when the line comes back. He says he keeps paper logs in a locker downstairs. If you hear me, sir, keep those safe. I can see the Aegis platform now that the sun is high enough to flash the optics on passing glass. It's on a flatbed 2 blocks south of the convention center, tucked behind Jersey barriers, with a tarp draped over the turret, and the transmitter mast collapsed. You can find a unit like that by looking for the way a building's reflection stutters when a LiDAR sweep washes over it. There's a beat in the mirror where the light doesn't come back clean. I found the beat. The strobe face is canted toward the eastbound lanes, and a pair of operators in matte helmets are checking a cable that runs back into the truck. If you are anywhere within 3 blocks of Pico and Figueroa, put concrete between you and street level. Stairwell cores, elevator banks, parking decks with ramps that let you get below the beamline, HE. Those are survivable spots when that turret starts its work. 2 drones have been loitering on the north-south line in front of my windows for nearly 10 minutes. One is the size of a kitchen chair with a LiDAR puck spinning over its nose and a set of spot modules under the belly. The other is smaller and looks like a camera mount with rotors. The small one has pivoted 3 times to point at my floor. The LiDAR unit paints out, and the smaller one holds stationary. Then they rotate together, as if passing a handoff. At 7:42 a.m., a text came through the secure backbone. Vacate within the hour. It did not include a badge, a signature block, or a reason. It didn't need one. I have a go bag by the door with a battery pack, 2 analog relay sticks, a roll of copper tape, insulated wire, a peel and stick whip antenna, and an old ham handheld with the keypad epoxy filled so I don't pocket dial a bad frequency. If I have to move, I can keep the carrier up from a stairwell window with copper taped to a downspout. It will not be pretty radio. It will be enough. I'm spreading my attention across other cities because daylight always tells truths dark can hide. Lower East Side in New York looks like a poor cartographer's dream. Blocks marked with chalk stencils that look like QR codes. Doors painted with diagonal slashes that point to stairwells. And windows open at the same height, like someone gave the residents a drill. Some buildings are untouched, and some look chewed down to ribs. And the pattern lines up with last night's list. Debt density, warrant history, flagged associations. In Chicago, the barricades on the south side are tighter than they were at midnight. Someone went out at first light and rolled cars from a used lot into cross streets, then dragged pallets out and stapled quilts to make visual occlusion panels. There are volunteers standing under ladder wells with clipboards taking down names and rooms for meltwater and insulin runs. In Miami, I see boats still shouldering into private docks along the Brickell corridor, and tower lobbies, with folding tables turned sideways to make checkpoints. I watch a man hold up a badge that looks official, and a woman shake her head and point him toward the street. Daylight makes people decide what they are going to be when there are witnesses. Phoenix stayed noisy all night along the I-10 corridor, and the daylight shows what that did. Houses with gravel yards and stucco walls now have sheets of mylar taped behind the front windows and strips of foil stuck to blinds to break silhouettes. A cul-de-sac north of Buckeye has a line of school buses parked nose to tail, so the cabins make a radio shadow where kids and grandparents can move without their phones lighting up the trackers. In Atlanta, a grocery distribution yard near the connector has become a staging point for something new. Citizens with pallet jacks and forklifts moving water and dry goods to shelters on a quiet schedule that isn't posting anywhere. If you are in a city with a distribution warehouse and the yard is quiet, that is your supply. You do not post a video. You pull the pallet, you split it, you move. There is a question in my inbox I have put off all night, and I should answer it before I start down the stairs. Alaska and Hawaii. I have 2 sources I trust. Anchorage reports what they call a modified observance. The police did not fully stand down. The troopers did not pull off the road. And EMS kept a skeleton crew running beneath a curfew. There were vigilante incidents on the Glen Highway last night and on Muldoon, but local authority did not go dark. In Hawaii, Honolulu enforced a curfew and reduced response, but not a full purge. Airport police at HNL turned arriving visitors from the mainland back into the concourse at midnight when they tried to charter small boats. Local amateur radio reports that block captains in Kalihi and Kaimuki kept order by walking stairwells with flashlights and lists. The purge, as designed, was aimed at the lower 48. State choices made the edges different. There will be hearings about that. My port feeds show motion again. A convoy rolled out of the Long Beach yard at 7:18 a.m., with server cages stacked 2 high inside box trucks and escort SUVs running fore and aft. If you want to understand what last night was, you follow the hard drives. The plate on the lead truck ties back to a logistics sub that changed names 3 times over 20 years, but never changed its office. I can see the swing bridge, and I can see a yard crane that had its boom swung over the axis 2 hours ago. Someone moved the crane as the convoy approached, and then let it drift back just enough to make a choke. The convoy is stopped, and the escorts have stepped out to talk at the first intersection. They are not angry. They are measuring. If you are anywhere near Terminal Island, do not go out to watch. The only safe part of a port fight is the part you never see. A message came in from Santa Monica while I was looking north. The caller says he is on Pico near 23rd, and the boulevard looks like a weather map from a March storm. NES. Shops half open like squinting eyes, cars parked at angles, and people forming brief lines that lift and scatter, every time a drone passes. He says the Coast Highway is a rumor. There are blockages at the McClure Tunnel and at the incline, and a set of barricades near Temescal. He says one group tried to cut through the Palisades and got stalled by fallen trees from last winter that no one ever cleared. He asked if there was a safe route east. I told him to use alleys and cut across parking decks and never follow a white van unless he knows it by name. I am being asked if the violence has started to outrun the people who built the program, and the answer this morning is yes. Misclassifications are stacking, and daytime mistakes are more visible. I count 3 incidents already where a strike team moved on a target block and ran into another team working a different list for the same building. In Dallas last night, a strobe platform and a drone swarm fired on the same corridor from opposite ends and blinded each other. In Chicago, earlier this morning, a mapping drone lost GPS and drifted into a barricade where someone threw a blanket over it and pushed it into a shed. I've done this job long enough to know that when organizations go from precise to clumsy, they start writing memos about asset preservation. One just appeared on an internal contractor channel. It recommends early termination in 3 metros if losses continue. The word unacceptable shows up twice. Before I move, I want to give you something practical. If you are sheltering above the 3rd floor in a building with a central core, spend 5 minutes now to walk your route to the stairwell and make sure the door you think is unlocked is actually unlocked. Carry a piece of tape and mark the hinge side with a small X at knee height so you can find it in the dark without a light. If you must show a light, cup it in your palm against the wall and let the spill give you just enough. If you have polished tile floors, wet a towel and lay it across to cut your reflection for cameras looking up from the lobby. If you have a gas meter inside a closet, do not try to close it unless you know where a pilot is burning. A leak in a stairwell will do more damage than any patrol. If you need to rest, sit in the angle where the railing meets the wall and keep your feet toward the landing so you can stand quietly when you hear steps. I'm about to shut my main console. I have left a micro recorder plugged into the panel downstairs to keep the carrier keyed for anyone trying to find this frequency by ear. If the studio gets raided, they will find an empty chair, a coffee cup with cold grounds, and a curtain pulled at a strange angle to reflect back a loop I left on the monitoring camera. There is a second stairwell behind the utility closet that dumps into a service corridor above a loading dock. I will tape the whip to a copper downspout at the 3rd floor turn and see if the analog stick holds long enough to bring you with me. If I go silent for more than a few minutes, wait. If I go silent for more than 20, switch to the posted backup frequency at the half-hour mark. Those of you running neighborhood nets know the schedule. A last scan before I move. Downtown New Orleans just came back to life on 2 cameras that went dark at midnight. A flatbed with a tower-mounted scanner is rolling slow-down charters with a small escort. Someone hung sheets from balconies as flags to indicate a clear corridor for first aid, and someone else used them to sight from across the square. In Detroit, Corktown shows a small parade of wheelchairs and strollers running the edge of Michigan Avenue in the quiet after a drone battery cycle. In Queens, a brownstone that was bypassed all night has a line of faces at the second-floor windows waiting for a sign. In Anchorage, a snowplow that hasn't seen snow in months is parked sideways across an arterial to keep a convoy from accelerating. In Honolulu, a group in reflective vests is walking visitors from a hotel to a school gym with clipboards and bottled water. Not everything is collapse. Some of it is just people deciding to hold. It's 8:12 a.m. and I have to move. The two drones have drifted a little lower, and the LiDAR unit's cone keeps touching the edge of the glass. I'm taking a body-worn mic and the handheld. I have copper tape in my pocket, a folded city map with a coil whip wired behind it, and a piece of chalk to mark doors that are safe for people following. I can see the Aegis turret blink once as someone powers the mast to test the actuator. If they start a sweep before I clear the second landing, I will need to sit against the concrete, feet braced, head down, and wait. The city looks like a draft under a thin sheet. The sheet is lifting. The draft is what matters. I'll stay with you as far as the stairwell will let me. One more thing before I put the mic in my collar and pull the door. If you are in a place where the morning looks safe, you will be tempted to step out and look around. Do it once, low, and only long enough to confirm that the thing you thought you heard is not on your floor. Then go back to your plan. If you are moving, move. If you are staying, stay. The worst mistakes I've recorded in 20 years of disaster coverage happen in the hour after daylight, when people let the rhythm of the sun trick the rhythm of their judgment. We have 8.5 hours to go on the clock. The models are still running. The programs are still collecting. But there are more of you than there are of them, and the city is learning where the angles are. This is Eli Moran, stepping into the stairwell, staying with you as long as the wire holds. It's 8:37 a.m. on July 13, 2095. I'm on the move now, voice in your ear from a stairwell 3 flights down from the studio. The body mic is pinned under my collar, and the handheld is taped to a copper downspout outside a broken window. If the signal sounds different, that's why. I left the recorder upstairs to keep the main carrier alive, but if the sweep team breaches, it will sound like static from an empty chair. The stairwell smells like wet concrete and dust. Someone must have dumped a fire extinguisher down here last night because the air has a dry, metallic bite. My shoes are crunching over powder as I move, and every sound feels magnified in the well. I'm taking it one landing at a time. Every few steps I stop, listen, and hold my breath. That's what survival looks like after 14 hours in a city under siege. It isn't sprinting, it's patience. I'm going to give you a broader picture while I descend. About 20 minutes ago, I intercepted a restricted channel between DHS Regional Command in Denver and contractor nodes working the Los Angeles and Chicago corridors. The conversation was raw. A DHS coordinator said, "Losses are mounting, protocols deviating. Recommend early termination in Zone C and Zone F." The reply from a contractor lead was colder. "Benchmarks not complete. We hold the window." That means some, inside the government, want to pull back. But the contractors who own the gear are pushing to keep the program running until their quotas are satisfied. It's no longer about control of streets. It's about control of contracts. You've been asking me all night whether this purge covers Alaska and Hawaii. The answer is finally clear. Anchorage authorities quietly refused full compliance. Police never stood down. Troopers kept patrolling, and EMS ran skeleton response beneath a curfew. There were vigilante incidents along the Glen Highway and on Muldoon, but local government never surrendered the grid. In Hawaii, Honolulu imposed a curfew and partial stand-down, but not the full purge. HNL Airport Police turned mainland arrivals back into the concourse when they tried to charter boats after midnight. Local amateur radio says block captains in Kalihi walked stairwells with clipboards and flashlights, logging residents in their own handwriting. The purge, by design, was aimed at the lower 48. State choice at the edges kept the fire from spreading there. I've stopped at the 10th floor landing. There's a small square of light where the window is cracked. I can see Figueroa down below, smudged with black streaks where cars were set alight and left to burn through the night. A metro bus is sideways at the intersection, and behind it, I can make out 4 figures crouched low with rifles. The gear doesn't match. 2 are in all black, helmet visors down, while the others are wearing desert pattern rigs, tan and green. They're not shooting at each other. They're sweeping in parallel, room to room, unit to unit, like they rehearsed it together. That's the first daylight proof that foreign contractors and black uniform strike teams are cooperating on the same block. Nationwide, the spiral continues. In Dallas, 2 contractor groups clashed over possession of confiscated servers in the design district just after sunrise. A warehouse fire burned uncontrolled for an hour because both sides refused to call suppression, and the blaze took half a block of small businesses with it. In Atlanta, 2 factions of operators tried to hold Peachtree at the same time, their algorithms overlapping. The result was chaos. Civilians were hit in the crossfire and both groups pulled back, leaving an open corridor that locals immediately used to run food and water into downtown. I'm taking a call now. Shortwave, line is yours. Eli, this is Alex. Anchorage. We've still got state troopers on patrol here. They never pulled out. There was a shootout near Glen Highway at 2 in the morning, but local EMS still responded. We've got people sheltered in a high school gym, volunteers cooking oatmeal on propane burners. We're scared, but it isn't like what you're describing down there. I ask him if he's seen federal presence. Nothing official, just local. Anchorage is holding the line. We're not letting this thing happen here. He thanks me and drops off. That's your answer, America. Alaska stayed human. Another call comes through, this one from Honolulu. Eli, we've got curfew, but not purge. Police are thin, but they're still here. A group of tourists tried to charter boats to Maui to wait out the day, but airport police turned them around. Locals are walking hotel guests to shelters at schools. We've got block captains with clipboards counting heads. It isn't perfect, but we're not killing each other. That's Hawaii. Modified observance, not collapse. I'm moving again. The air thickens with smoke as I descend, meaning the lower floors are compromised. Someone set fires in the lobby overnight, or maybe it was just collateral. My analog uplink is holding, but I'm layering a second copper strip behind the stairwell radiator just in case the signal fades. That's the advantage of analog. It doesn't look sleek, but it stays alive when the digital nets are jammed. At 8:58 a.m., I intercepted a contractor packet labeled Reinstatement Protocol Draft. It outlines an emergency termination plan that would allow regional directors to cut the purge short in select metros if contractor losses surpass a certain threshold. The threshold is described as asset unrecoverable beyond operational tolerance. In plain words, that means if too much gear burns, if too many drones are bricked, or if the Aegis platforms fail, they'll pull the plug. The draft isn't signed, which means it's only circulating for debate. But the fact that it exists shows fear. Even those who lit this fire are afraid of being burned by it. More reports of misfires. In Phoenix, 2 drone swarms collided when their software claimed the same corridor. Locals described the sound like a hive collapsing, rotors smashing against each other before both groups fell into a parking lot. Residents used the gap to move seniors and children into an underground garage, with foil taped across the entrances. In Chicago, barricades on 79th were reinforced overnight with cars and pallets. But when a mapping drone drifted GPS, residents smothered it with blankets, dragged it into a shed, and rolled a car over the door. That drone is not coming back online today. I've reached the lobby stairwell. The glass doors are shattered, sunlight streaking across a floor littered with paper and debris. I can hear low rotor hum outside. There's a maintenance cart tipped over against the wall with a toolbox cracked open. The tools inside aren't tools. They're jammers, disguised as wrenches and drills. That crew from last night wasn't maintenance. They were sweep prep. My decision to move saved me. A call is breaking through from Houston. Eli, they're fighting each other here. We watched 2 black teams face off against a group in desert rigs. Thought they'd kill each other, but they just split the block and started hitting opposite apartments together. They're clearing names from lists. It's coordinated. I ask him if civilians have any safe zones. No. You run, you hide, or you're dragged. We're in a laundry room now. 30 people. No light. The line drops. That's the reality. Cooperation when it suits them. Division when quotas are in conflict. It's now 9:24 a.m. I can confirm the port convoys carrying server racks have stalled at Terminal Island. Locals used a yard crane to swing a container across the lane, and the lead truck is pinned. Escorts are posturing, but they haven't fired yet. Those servers are the memory of the night. If they're moved out of Los Angeles, the story of what happened here will be scrubbed. If they're stopped, the truth has a chance to survive. I'm stepping outside the lobby now. The heat hits me like opening an oven. Smoke, rubber, metal, sunlight bouncing off glass facades scarred with soot. A drone shadows the intersection, its lens tilting toward me. I keep my head down, mic tight to my collar, and my body angled toward a side street where the shadows are deeper. If I cut across and stay low, I can reach a rooftop 2 blocks east where a copper drain pipe will give me a cleaner signal. It's 9:41 a.m. The Purge is still running, but the cracks are spreading. Regional directors are arguing, contractors are clashing, civilians are resisting, and entire states are breaking ranks. The spiral is running away from its authors. They built a fire they thought they could contain, but it's chewing through the frame faster than they expected. If the reinstatement draft goes live, the Purge could end early in some cities. If it doesn't, the last 7 hours will make the night look calm. This is Eli Moran, broadcasting from the street now. Eyes on a city that looks like a battlefield lit by morning sun. I'll stay live as long as the copper holds and the drones don't see me. If I go silent, know this: the Purge is no longer under control. It's unspooling into something even its makers fear. It's 9:52 a.m., July 13th, 2095, and I'm still alive in downtown Los Angeles. The lobby stairwell is behind me. The studio is gone, and I've cut across 2 blocks on foot under broken glass canopies and smoke haze. I'm crouched now against the wall of a loading bay on 9th Street, handheld clipped to a copper wire I've run along the edge of a storm grate. If you're hearing this, it means the wire is doing its job. The street feels emptied of sound except for the steady pulse of drones above. You can hear their rotors echoing between the glass faces of towers, but the footsteps you'd expect at this hour in Los Angeles are gone. No delivery trucks, no commuters, no children walking to school. Just the hum of machines and the occasional snap of a distant rifle burst. Every doorway looks like an eye shut tight. I've been digging into fresh intercepts while I move. At 9:45 a.m., a coded packet crossed the Denver hub carrying the subject line, Omega Reset Draft. The language is cautious but clear. If contractor losses exceed tolerance, DHS is considering authorizing a timed reset, one burst signal designed to brick drones, strobe platforms, and LiDAR arrays simultaneously. The draft window lists 3:30 to 4:00 p.m. The catch is that not every system is tied to the federal backbone. Contractors with air-gapped gear would stay live. That means even if the reset is triggered, some of the most dangerous platforms will keep operating until their batteries die. The debate is splitting command. One regional director wants an early abort to stop equipment losses. Another insists benchmarks must be met before the Purge ends. That word again, benchmarks. This is no longer about crime or morality. It's about contracts fulfilled, quotas met, and data harvested. That fracture is why you're seeing mistakes and contradictions on the ground. Orders are pulling in opposite directions. I'm going to take you across the country now, because what's happening in Los Angeles is only one part of a larger picture. In Detroit, residents in Corktown mounted a counteroffensive just after dawn. They used foil emergency blankets to blind thermal scopes and leaf blowers to push smoke across alleys, masking their movements. For 20 minutes, civilians moved strollers and wheelchairs across Michigan Avenue without drones locking on. In Philadelphia's Southwark, families stacked cardboard and duct-taped foil to make crude heat baffles, long enough to funnel children into a church basement. Small, improvised victories, but they matter. They show adaptation. In Phoenix, homeowner associations and irrigation crews hacked their own systems, opening valves to create curtains of mist across cul-de-sacs. Strobe platforms rely on line of sight, and when the mist thickens, the beam diffuses. Families ducked under those veils and moved in near silence to safer blocks. That wasn't a military tactic. That was gardeners and water techs making a plan. In Seattle, a sanitation crew hijacked a city leaf blower trailer and turned it on a narrow alley, pushing chemical irritant back toward the operators who deployed it. Civilians staggered but kept moving. Operators pulled back. Sometimes the simplest tool in the hands of people who refuse to quit is enough. I've paused at a corner on Olive Street. To my left, smoke is rising from what used to be a grocery store. A group of civilians is filtering supplies into backpacks, water bottles, canned food, first aid. They're moving fast, in pairs, ducking under every drone shadow. One child holds onto his mother's sleeve with both fists, eyes wide, but quiet. That's how survival looks in daylight. No noise, no chaos, just intent. I don't interfere. I let them pass, and then I move on. Another intercept just came across my terminal audio from a DHS command call. The quote is exact. Abort is politically impossible. Continue to optimize. That was said at 9:58 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Optimize means continue culling. No ambiguity. Taking a shortwave call now. Eli, this is Samantha in Cleveland. We turned the Carnegie branch into a logistics hub. We pulled out paper maps. We're handwriting rosters. And we're making copies with an old mimeograph in the basement. Phones and Wi-Fi are compromised, so we went analog. We've got teens running on bikes with folded maps to safe houses. It isn't high-tech, but it works. I tell her that's exactly the right move. Analog resists optimization. They thank me, and the line fades. It's not just civilians improvising. In Houston, foreign contractors clashed with domestic black teams around Montrose. Both sides tried to seize an Aegis platform. The fight spilled across an entire block, and when the strobe fired, it knocked down civilians and operators alike. Power transformers blew in the shock, leaving 6 blocks dark and silent. If the government wanted controlled conditions, they lost them. The spiral is beyond their grip. Let's talk about Alaska and Hawaii again, because I've been watching their feeds as well. Anchorage is still holding its modified observance. Troopers are on patrol. EMS crews are running calls. Limited but real. A shelter at a high school gym is operating with propane burners and cots. Honolulu is under curfew, but not purge. Locals are walking hotel guests to shelters. Block captains with clipboards are still counting heads. The difference is sharp. The lower 48 is collapsing under targeted violence, but 2 states chose differently. Their choices will matter in the aftermath. I've just reached a rooftop 2 blocks east of the convention center. I'm crouched by a copper drain pipe with the whip antenna taped along it. From here, I can see the Aegis MKIV platform clearly now. The mast is up, turret locked toward Pico. Operators stand beside it, helmets reflecting sunlight. Their posture is casual, like they're confident no one can touch them. If the Omega Reset draft goes live, this platform is supposed to brick. But if it's air-gapped, it will keep firing. That's the danger of halfway measures. Another call is cutting in, this time from a guard sergeant in a non-activated state. We were told to stand down, but we didn't. We pulled old ambulances out of storage. No markings, no radios. We're moving people between basements. We don't log it, we don't call it in, we just do it. That's resistance from inside the uniform. I thank him and tell him to stay quiet, keep moving, keep saving who he can. He signs off with a steady breath. It's now 10:41 a.m. 11 hours and 41 minutes since the purge began. Civilians are adapting. Regional directors are fracturing, and contractors are clashing. I've got proof of an Omega reset plan, but no guarantee it will fire. If it does, drones may fall from the sky. If it doesn't, the last 6 hours will be the worst. Either way, the spiral is no longer controlled. It's 6 a.m., July 13th, 2095. I'm still live, crouched on a rooftop east of the convention center, Los Angeles. The sun is high now, light glancing off broken glass and blackened steel. The air has thickened with smoke from the south, drifting from the port of Los Angeles, where the convoys are stalled. You can taste it in the back of your throat: burnt rubber, diesel, salt. The city has shifted from night terror to day siege. My feed shows Terminal Island as the center of a fight with too many sides to count. The convoy carrying server cages is still pinned at a choke point, where a crane was swung across the access. The escort's black uniformed strike teams, mixed with desert rig contractors, are arguing in the open, while locals watch from rooftops with binoculars. A group of port workers used a yard crane to block the lane, and now the trucks sit idling with racks of drives that record every second of last night. These servers are memory. If they leave the port, the Purge becomes a rumor that can be rewritten. If they're stopped, the truth has a chance to breathe. At 11:12 a.m., a strobe platform fired. The turret swept low, pulse washing across the dock. Civilians and operators dropped together, bodies collapsing in silence. For nearly 2 minutes, the scene froze, no movement except for smoke drifting from the stacks. Then the operators stood, dragging civilians into trucks. But the locals who swung the crane never came out. I don't know if they're alive under the steel or gone. That's what resistance looks like here: quiet sabotage and the risk of never being seen again. In New York, new footage from Midtown shows an organized attempt to create safe passage corridors. Residents hung white flags from windows to signal stairwells open for medical movement. For half an hour it worked. Civilians carrying supplies passed without harassment. Then, an unknown team with suppressed rifles shot the flags down. The signal was broken, and panic rippled back through the corridor. Trust is fragile in this landscape. Once broken, it's hard to restore. Miami tells a different story. At 11:23 a.m., a sealed garage beneath a brickle tower was forced open by residents using a forklift. Inside, they found vans with biometric scanners bolted to the walls and paper rolls listing names and addresses. Those vans weren't evacuation vehicles. They were processing stations. Locals dragged the scanners into the street and smashed them with sledgehammers, leaving the paper lists scattered. Eyewitness calls describe people stuffing the rolls into backpacks, saying, "If they want our names, they'll have to take them back." That was caught on multiple feeds. It may end up being evidence. Anchorage continues to hold. The mayor announced over local radio that Alaska will not observe the purge any further. State troopers remain on patrol. Hospitals are open at reduced capacity. Anchorage has become proof that refusal was possible. Honolulu is adjusting too. EMS dispatch resumed at noon local time after public outcry. Curfews remain, but ambulances are moving. The difference is plain. 2 states chose partial resistance, and their cities aren't burning the way ours are. I'm taking a shortwave call now. Eli, I'm on the Long Beach docks. We saw them load drives into a truck, each rack tagged with serials. I wrote some down. They match a contractor you named last night, Logan, Rourke. They're not just collecting data, they're exporting it in real time. I ask if he can send the list. I've got it on paper. I'll try to get it to a relay if I make it out. The line goes dead. That list could tie contractors to every action we've witnessed. If he survives, it will matter. The violent spiral isn't limited to ports. In Philadelphia, civilians discovered a van abandoned near Fairmount Park with crates of crowd control devices labeled training. They weren't inert. One misfired when handled, knocking down everyone in a 20-foot circle. 3 didn't wake up. In Dallas, a misaligned drone swarm fired on its own escort vehicles, forcing the operators to abandon the block. These mistakes prove what insiders already fear: control is slipping. The optimization program is bleeding into chaos. Closer to me, on Figueroa, the street has become a staging point for both sides. At 11:38 a.m., I watch civilians form a bucket line to pass water bottles into a burned-out apartment. 2 blocks away, black uniformed teams deployed portable jammers and began funneling residents into alleys. Between them lies a no-man's land, where no one dares step. I stay on the rooftops, out of sight, antenna taped to copper and mic low to my collar. At 11:44 a.m., another intercept arrived, this one internal. A contractor executive warned their field operators, "Do not damage the drives." That confirms the priority. Not people, not property, not order. The data is the asset. Human life is secondary, collateral at best. That's why convoys are being escorted so heavily. The drives will tell the story of this purge, but only if they are kept intact and controlled. It's now 11:52 a.m. I'm preparing to move again. Drones are circling lower, their shadows cutting across glass. The hum is constant, a background noise that feels like a second heartbeat. I've marked 2 stairwells ahead with chalk, safe for civilians if they find them. I'll keep broadcasting until I'm cut off. Remember this: where you see convoys, you see the memory of this night. If you can't stop them, at least mark where they pass. Records matter. It's 12:08 p.m., July 13th, 2095. I'm out of the high-rise district now, moving east on foot with a body mic clipped to my shirt and the handheld taped to copper that runs down into a storm drain. The static you hear between my words isn't interference. It's the hiss of signal fighting against the jammers that hum across downtown. This is what survival sounds like when every node in the city is trying to kill your voice. The sun is sharp overhead. Heat is building off asphalt, cracked by fires that burned overnight. My shoes crunch over glass. Every car I pass has its doors open, belongings scattered in the seats, and sometimes a trail of footsteps leading away. I duck through parking ramps, cut across alleys, and stay low when drones pass. The buildings are quiet, windows shuttered, curtains drawn. You could believe the city is empty if you didn't notice the faint movement, an arm pulling back from a window, a curtain shifting, a face vanishing when it realizes someone is outside. The city is alive, but hiding. I've been monitoring national feeds as I move. The fracture between federal command and contractors is widening. At 11:58 a.m. Eastern Time, a regional director in Chicago was recorded shouting on a secure call, "End it now. This is untenable." The reply from a contractor exec was ice cold. "Authority remains with us until 17:00 hours. Termination before benchmarks exposes liability." That word again, benchmarks. They are still hunting their quotas. And while they argue, civilians are improvising survival in ways the models never predicted. Detroit's Corktown neighborhood has become a lesson in adaptation. Residents used foil emergency blankets to cover alley entrances, blinding thermal sensors. They stacked garden mulch bags to build crude blast walls against subsonic emitters. Families moved wheelchairs and strollers under that cover. In Philadelphia's Kensington district, residents formed relay lines using bicycles. Riders carried paper maps with handwritten notes, weaving through alleys to deliver insulin, baby formula, and bottled water. Every block marked safe or unsafe in red marker. None of that appears on a contractor's map, but it's how neighborhoods live through a day like this. I've stopped under an awning on Olympic Boulevard. The concrete above is streaked with black soot. Across the street, a half-collapsed bodega is still smoking. Inside, shelves are stripped bare, but the coolers hum faintly, powered by a backup battery someone rigged. I can see figures crouched inside, passing cans of soda into backpacks. A small boy carries one in both hands, gripping it like treasure. That's what survival looks like at noon in Los Angeles, a soda can handled like gold. A call is breaking through on shortwave. "Eli, this is Nate from Cincinnati. They sealed our street last night with unmarked vans, scanning everyone. At sunrise, the vans left. But we broke into a school basement. We found chalkboards and started logging who was alive, who had food, who needed medicine. We're running shifts to guard the stairwell. No tech, just paper. I ask him if the city is still active. Yes, but it's quiet now. Too quiet. We know they're still here, but we're going analog. That's how we live through it. That line stays with me, going analog. The future looks digital, but survival is handwritten rosters in a school basement. I've intercepted chatter about an Omega reset scheduled window between 3:30 and 4:00 p.m. Eastern. It's a plan to shut down drones, strobes, and LiDAR arrays with a single burst signal. But the intercepts admit the flaw contractors with air-gapped systems will stay live. That means, even if the reset is authorized, platforms like the Aegis truck I saw on Figueroa will keep firing. Best case, the sky's clear of drones. Worst case, civilians step into the open too soon and are cut down by machines that didn't get the signal. Remember that. If you're planning to move later today, don't trust the silence. Back on the streets here, I see proof of adaptation. In Koreatown, residents are taping foil-lined umbrellas to mimic multiple silhouettes, confusing LiDAR tracking. In Boyle Heights, hoses run from yards across sidewalks, spraying fine mist into the air to scatter strobe beams. A child's voice shouted instructions. Stay under the water. Families moved through the spray and vanished into buildings before drones could adjust. Low-tech, improvised, but effective. It's now 12:34 p.m. Nationwide, reports of contractor clashes are rising. In Dallas, one convoy accidentally fired on another after misreading transponder codes. In Phoenix, HOA brigades used irrigation pipes to flood streets, forcing drones to reroute. In Seattle, sanitation workers turned trash trucks sideways across arterials to block line of sight for strobe trucks. Every mistake and every countermeasure shows the same thing: the spiral is beyond control. This is no longer the government's purge. It's a dozen factions stumbling through a city on fire. I'm taking another call. Eli, I'm Maria, a librarian in Denver. We pulled a generator into the branch, and now we're copying rosters, running first aid, and keeping kids quiet in the basement stacks. We've got paper maps with highlighters showing safe corridors. Phones are down, but we're alive. That's what I keep hearing from city after city. Libraries are becoming shelters. Maps are being hand-drawn, and rosters written in pencil. Old systems are more reliable than new ones, when the new ones are built to betray you. It's 12:52 p.m. The sun is directly overhead, baking the asphalt and filling the air with shimmering heat. Drones circle high, less aggressive than at night, but still present. The hum has become part of the city's rhythm. I keep moving rooftop to rooftop, antenna taped to copper, mic low against my collar. Every block I pass shows signs of both collapse and resilience: burned-out cars, but also water buckets, lined in rows, shattered windows, but also stairwells, chalked with symbols, marking safety. The city is bleeding, but it isn't dead. This is Eli Moran. It's past noon in Los Angeles, and we have just under 5 hours until the sirens mark the end of this purge. The question is whether those in control will let it end at all. Stay hidden, stay quiet, and keep your maps close. It's 1:04 p.m., July 13th, 2095. I've pushed east from the convention center, and I'm sheltering now on the roof of a low-rise garage, just high enough to catch a line of sight from my antenna without drawing drone attention. The streets below are hot with midday glare, heat waves rising off asphalt streaked with ash. The smell of burning rubber mixes with tar and diesel. The purge has been running for 20 hours, and for the first time since last night, I can feel the balance shifting not toward order, but toward raw improvisation by civilians who refuse to fold. Nationwide, the stories are the same. People are learning. They're adapting faster than the models predicted. In Phoenix, I intercepted drone feeds showing cul-de-sacs covered in cheap mylar blankets stretched across garages and driveways. Families move beneath those sheets like ghosts, invisible to thermal scans. In Seattle, sanitation crews turned their fleet of garbage trucks into rolling walls, parking them sideways across arterials to cut strobe lines. In New Orleans, volunteers pulled water hoses from fire stations and sprayed fine mist across Bourbon Street. When a strobe fired, the beam diffused in the vapor, weakening enough that people could run beneath it. These aren't military tactics. They're the tactics of neighbors with no other choice. I've intercepted new chatter from contractor networks. The phrase asset preservation is appearing with increasing frequency. At 12:47 p.m. Pacific, a packet labeled Preservation Order, Zone F, crossed the backbone. The language is clear. If losses continue at this rate, contractors are to abandon quotas and focus on securing remaining platforms and servers. That means the Purge is approaching the point where the government fears losing its tools more than losing control of the population. That fear is leverage. If civilians can disable or damage enough platforms, the reset may come earlier. Closer to home, I've seen the same signs of adaptation. In Boyle Heights, residents ran garden hoses across sidewalks, spraying mist into the street. When drones passed, families moved in that cover, children clinging to buckets of food. In Koreatown, umbrellas lined with foil created decoys, heat signatures large enough to confuse LiDAR and distract patrols. In South Central, 2 blocks turned into an RF shadow after residents parked buses nose to tail, cutting wireless signals and forcing drones to reroute. None of these measures existed last night. They were born in the space between midnight and noon. I'm taking a shortwave call now. Eli, I'm calling from Dallas. They used gas on us in a sealed parking structure. We thought it was non-lethal, but 3 people didn't wake up. We cracked open floor drains, used box fans, anything to move air. We're alive because someone remembered the drains. That's the only reason. I asked him if he's seen contractors return. Not yet. They'll be back. But we've got the drains marked now. We'll be ready. That's adaptation, in its rawest form, learning in hours what was never meant to be learned at all. In Houston, a foreign contractor group clashed again with domestic black teams over control of an Aegis platform. I watched footage of the fight on a drone feed. Both sides fired, and when the strobe discharged, it dropped operators and civilians alike. Transformers blew on the block, leaving the area dark and eerily quiet. That silence lasted until locals ran into the gap, pulling survivors into basements and leaving the contractors sprawled in the street. Even in chaos, the city takes its moments. Anchorage remains stable. State troopers continue patrols. EMS crews are still active. A gym shelter is housing families with propane stoves and paper rosters. Honolulu is adapting as well. EMS resumed dispatch at noon local time. Curfews remain, but the streets are not open to violence the way they are here. 2 states broke from the design, and their people are still alive in numbers that make the difference obvious. After today, that contrast will be political fuel. Another call is breaking through. Eli, this is Jorge from San Antonio. We figured out the strobe track's shadows. So we dug shallow trenches across the street, just deep enough to make people look shorter when they run. The beam track's wrong, and you get a few more seconds. That's all it takes. He's right. Seconds are survival. He thanks me, and the line cuts. It's 1:36 p.m. Drones above Los Angeles are moving slower, scanning wider arcs, like they've been ordered to conserve energy. That could mean batteries are low, or it could mean asset preservation protocols have been issued here too. On the ground, civilians are moving in tighter groups, staying in alleys and under shadows. I've seen chalk marks on walls, symbols indicating safe stairwells, hidden basements, or doors that open into escape corridors. People are building their own networks with chalk and paper. That isn't chaos, that's resilience. Another intercept just crossed. At 1:42 p.m., DHS Command in Denver authorized limited preservation corridors in Chicago and Los Angeles. The instruction: contractors are to avoid certain districts to prevent further equipment loss. In plain terms, It means some neighborhoods are being left alone not because of compassion, but because they aren't considered worth the risk anymore. If you're in one of those neighborhoods, you may feel sudden silence. Don't trust it. Quiet doesn't always mean safe. I've reached a new rooftop overlooking the 10 freeway. The lanes are blocked with jackknifed semis, some burned, some still idling. A convoy of SUVs sits idle on the shoulder, operators arguing beside them. Civilians move in the gaps, dragging carts loaded with bottled water. I don't interfere. I watch, I record, I tell you what I see. This is Los Angeles at 1:53 p.m., broken, burning, but alive in ways the program never accounted for. This is Eli Moran. We're past the 20-hour mark of this purge. The government calls it optimization. The contractors call it benchmarks. But what I see on the ground are neighbors carrying buckets of water, kids holding chalk to mark doors, and buses parked nose to tail to block signals. The purge is failing, not because it's ending, but because people are refusing to play by its design. Stay quiet. Stay clever. And remember, every second you survive is a second the models didn't predict. It's 2:07 p.m., July 13th, 2095. 21 hours since the purge began. I'm sitting low against the parapet of a mid-rise overlooking the freeway. My antenna wire is taped to a rusted vent pipe, and the handheld's battery is running warm in my palm. If the signal wavers, it's because I'm pushing it past its comfort zone. But as long as you can hear me, I'll keep talking. The sun is punishing now. Heat bakes the concrete and reflects off glass in dazzling flashes that sting the eyes. Distant fires smolder and send up plumes that shimmer against the skyline. The drones circling overhead have slowed their passes, scanning wider, conserving charge. Their operators are pulling back not because the purge is over, but because their machines are being lost faster than they can be replaced. At 1:58 p.m. Pacific, I intercepted a contractor situation report marked Unacceptable Losses, Zone F. The language was clinical, but the message was blunt. Equipment losses, fratricide, and data capture failures have exceeded tolerance. The memo recommended selective early termination to preserve remaining assets. In other words, they've burned through too much hardware, lost too much data, and are considering ending the purge before the official 5:0 p.m. cutoff. But the decision isn't clean. One voice in the chain insists benchmarks must still be met. Another wants to cut and run. That fracture is growing wider by the hour. Evidence of the spiral is visible everywhere. In Los Angeles, a black unit strike team misidentified a mid-rise sheltering administrative staff of a protected corporate client. At 2:12 p.m., they breached the lobby, only to be met by private security who opened fire. 2 operators went down before the confusion cleared. By the time command intervened, both sides had taken casualties. That's what happens when software makes mistakes and men with rifles trust the models more than their eyes. In Chicago, a drone swarm collided with another over Bronzeville when both sets of operators claimed the same grid. The wreckage fell onto a block where residents had raised tarps as shade. Instead of scattering, the civilians rushed into the debris, stripping batteries and optics. By the time contractors arrived, half the gear was gone, pulled into basements, and hidden behind barricades. In Miami, 2 strobe platforms fired simultaneously on the same block in Little Havana, frying a transformer yard and plunging 10 square blocks into darkness. The machines disabled their own surveillance. That neighborhood is quiet now, and people are moving food and water through the dark without interference. I'm taking a shortwave call. Eli, this is Marcus in Phoenix. They tried to use drones to corral us into a cul-de-sac, but we'd already rigged sprinklers. The beams diffused, and people ran out the other side. My brother had a camera and caught it all. The drones just hovered, confused, like they didn't know what to do. I ask if the footage is safe. We've got it on a hard drive. We're hiding it in the church basement. If we survive, it'll get out. That's how truth survives days like this. hidden in basements on drives wrapped in blankets. Another intercept from DHS Command reveals how far the spiral has slipped. A regional director warned, collateral on protected cohorts will trigger liability. That's bureaucratic code for what we just saw in Los Angeles staff of influential companies or officials being caught in the sweep. When the wrong people die, the calculus shifts. Civilians in low-income districts never had protection, but now that the purge is spilling over into places it wasn't meant to touch, the operators are nervous. Across the country, civilians are continuing to resist. In Atlanta, families discovered that the sound-based weapons lose potency in enclosed stairwells. They lined stairwells with mattresses, dampened the sound, and sheltered whole families inside. In Philadelphia, 2 blocks in Southwark are using hand-painted symbols on doors. Triangles for safe water, circles for first aid, crosses for danger. It's crude but effective, and it spreads faster than any digital map. In Detroit, a neighborhood printed paper bulletins with mimeographs and posted them on telephone poles, warning where sweep teams were last seen. Analog networks are outpacing digital trackers. It's 2:29 p.m. The Omega Reset chatter is intensifying. Multiple intercepts confirm a scheduled attempt between 3:30 and 4:00 p.m. Eastern to send a kill signal to drones and platforms. But there's dissent even here. Some contractors are refusing to integrate their gear, keeping it air-gapped. That means even if the reset works, civilians who trust the sudden silence may step into the open too soon. If you're listening, don't move just because the sky goes quiet. Wait, confirm with your own eyes before stepping out. I've reached another vantage point above the freeway. A convoy is stalled at the on-ramp, SUVs nose to tail. Operators standing in the heat. Civilians have blocked the ramp with a municipal dump truck left at an angle. Keys gone. The operators aren't firing, they're waiting. Probably for clearance. Probably for data capture. For now, the block holds. Below me, children are filling buckets at a broken hydrant. Parents holding their arms as they run back under cover. The purge is still hunting, but the city is learning to move in its blind spots. Another call is cutting through static. Eli, this is Aaron from Boston. We've seen 2 exclusion bubbles here. GPS fences. Anyone who stepped inside was targeted, but one glitched when 2 bubbles overlapped, and targeting stopped. We ran 60 people through before they fixed it. That's the spiral again. Systems interfering with themselves. The more complicated the network, the easier it is for civilians to exploit its errors. It's 2:47 p.m. The hum of drones above me has thinned. I count 3 instead of 7. Either they've been redeployed, or batteries are dying. The street feels different now, less like a hunted ground, more like a waiting room. But the danger hasn't passed. Contractors are still out there, still holding their quotas, still waiting for the signal that tells them whether to abort or double down. Until the sirens sound at 5:00 p.m., no one is safe. This is Eli Moran, still live, still recording. The government calls it optimization. The contractors call it benchmarks. But on the ground, what I see are broken machines, chalk marks on doors, and families moving water through mist. The purge is failing in its own terms, but it hasn't ended yet. Stay hidden, stay clever, and don't trust silence until the clock runs out. It's 3:02 p.m., July 13th, 2095. 22 hours into the purge. The sun is high and merciless. The air in Los Angeles is shimmering with heat, broken only by smoke plumes that rise from burned-out intersections. I'm crouched now in the stairwell of a parking deck near Venice Boulevard, antenna wire threaded along a copper drain pipe. The handheld's battery is almost dry, but for now the signal holds. I can hear static between my words, which means the jammers are still active. The chatter about Omega Reset has reached a fever pitch. At 2:56 p.m. Pacific, a packet labeled Reset Authorization Pending crossed the Denver backbone. The language, all assets, synchronize. Burst at 15:47 EST. That's 12:47 p.m. Pacific. If the authorization holds, within the next hour, drones and strobe platforms tied to federal command will be bricked. But here's the problem: air-gapped gear won't hear the signal. Contractors who isolated their systems will keep firing. That means silence will not mean safety. I repeat, do not trust silence. Wait. Confirm with your own eyes before moving. At 3:09 p.m., I saw my first sign that command is losing its grip. 2 drones above Los Angeles abruptly dropped, their rotors stuttering as if power was cut mid-flight. They spiraled down into a street, striking the roof of a burned sedan. Civilians peeked out, hesitated, then rushed forward. They stripped the batteries, pulled the optics, and vanished into buildings before anyone arrived. That moment was cautious, hesitant, but it showed how quickly people will test a gap. Nationwide, reports are the same. In Miami, a strobe platform locked up and went still after a software burst. Locals rushed the block, dragging food carts through the silence. In Chicago, an entire swarm of drones froze mid-flight and crashed into an abandoned lot. Residents poured into the space, cheering, moving supplies across the open ground. But in Dallas, silence was a trap. A reset knocked out 3 drones, but an air-gapped Aegis platform stayed live. Civilians who stepped out were caught in its sweep. 20 people dropped before anyone realized what had happened. That's what makes this reset dangerous. It offers false hope. I'm taking a shortwave call now. Eli, this is Caroline from Baltimore. We thought it was safe when the drones fell. People went into the street. Then a truck with mounted optics came around the corner, still active. We lost 6 seconds. We're back inside now, terrified. Don't let people think it's over. Her voice cracks, and then the line fades. That's the warning. Silence is not the end. Closer to me, in Los Angeles, civilians are growing bolder. I watched a group of teenagers use chalk to mark arrows on walls, pointing to safe corridors. They carried buckets of water and bags of rice, moving in disciplined lines. When a drone fell from the sky 2 blocks over, they cheered, but they didn't break discipline. They still stayed under cover, moving from shadow to shadow. These are survival instincts hardened by 22 hours of violence. At 3:21 p.m. Pacific, I intercepted another fragment. It read, "Reset pulse incomplete. Contractor nodes blocking sync." That means the reset is not universal. Some systems are actively resisting the kill signal. A handful of companies are fighting to preserve their equipment, even as the government tries to shut them down. It's no longer just civilians against operators. It's contractors fighting each other while the government scrambles to regain authority. I've moved to another vantage point. From here, I can see the skyline of downtown through smoke. The once bright glass towers look muted, half hidden in haze. Below, the freeway is still blocked by jackknife trucks. Civilians have dragged water barrels into the open and are filling bottles. Children crouch beside them, eyes darting to the sky. When a drone dropped nearby, a cheer rose up, but quickly died when another kept circling. That's the danger of partial resets. They confuse more than they protect. In New Orleans, locals reported a swarm of drones colliding midair when their guidance systems desynced during the reset attempt. The wreckage fell into Bourbon Street. Civilians immediately scavenged the parts, dragging rotors and batteries into alleys. In Boston, an entire district went quiet when jammers failed after a reset, and civilians moved into open ground to set up aid stations. But in Houston, air-gapped platforms fired into a crowd celebrating drone falls. Survivors are now calling it a massacre. That word is spreading, uncontained. I'm taking another call. Eli, I'm David, a former Navy tech from Norfolk. We figured out foil mesh blocks millimeter wave scans if you layer it against brick. We built a corridor lined with mesh, and civilians moved through untouched. We don't trust the reset. We make our own. That's the truth of this day. Civilians are not waiting for command to save them. They're building their own defenses. At 4:38 p.m. Pacific. Another packet arrived. Omega reset window extended. Next attempt 16:20 EST. That's 1:20 p.m. Pacific. They're trying again. The first reset failed to cover all systems. The second will be a harder push. But until then, the danger remains half the sky quiet, half the sky still hunting. I've shifted to a rooftop near Pico Union. From here, I see families moving between buildings under sheets of mist sprayed by hoses. Children cling to buckets. Parents guide them with whispers. Drones circle slower, uncertain, some falling from the sky, others staying live. It's a patchwork of safety and death. The city is fractured into zones of silence and zones of fire. It's now 3:54 p.m. The hum of drones is lighter than it was an hour ago, but I can still see a strobe platform positioned at an intersection. Its turret alive, its mast upright. That one is air-gapped. It will not hear the reset. Civilians hiding nearby don't know that yet. If they step out, thinking the purge is over, they'll be cut down. That's the danger of half measures. It's 4:03 p.m., July 13th, 2095. 23 hours since the purge began. The sky over Los Angeles looks different now. The drone swarm that hung over the city all night and morning is thinning. Their hum weaker. Their pass is less frequent. Every few minutes another falls, spiraling into the streets with rotors screaming. Civilians cheer when they hit pavement, but the cheers die fast when another drone drifts overhead still alive. This is what a reset feels like, not an end, but a fracture. At 4:07 p.m. Pacific, the second Omega reset pulse hit. My terminal lit with chatter. Omega sync initiated. Node coverage 82%. In plain words, nearly 1 out of 5 systems ignored the signal. Drones tied to Federal Command bricked instantly, their lights flickering out mid-air. Strobe platforms froze mid-rotation. LiDAR scanners went dark, but air-gap systems, controlled directly by contractors, stayed live. That left the city divided blocks of silence side by side with blocks still hunted. Nationwide, the effects were immediate. In Chicago, entire swarms collapsed onto vacant lots. Residents poured into the open, carrying food and medicine across spaces that had been kill zones minutes earlier. In Miami, Brickell went dark and quiet when platforms bricked, and families walked into the streets, carrying backpacks, faces tilted upward in disbelief. In New York, Lower Manhattan suddenly opened like a wound when drones fell into the Hudson. Civilians rushing onto bridges to cross into safer boroughs. But in Dallas, an air-gapped Aegis truck swept a crowd celebrating the silence. 20 people fell where they stood, proof that the purge was not over everywhere. I've moved 2 blocks south to a library that has turned into a shelter. Inside, librarians are taping copper wire to a downspout, helping me keep this broadcast alive. Families fill the basement stacks, children clutching notebooks, where names are written in pencil. A teenager runs between tables, marking maps with highlighters, while an older woman writes supply lists by candlelight. The building smells of sweat and paper, but it is steady, calm. The library has become a fortress of memory in a city still under siege. At 4:19 p.m., a new burst crossed the Denver hub. Preserve remaining nodes. Avoid further exposure. That was the first official admission that the purge had failed its benchmarks. They no longer talk about optimization. They talk about preservation, saving what's left of their equipment and their contracts. That is the language of retreat. I'm taking a call. Eli, I'm Chris from Los Angeles, south near Pico. We heard the silence and thought it was over. People stepped into the street, cheering. Then a turret still live swept the corner. It dropped 15 before we realized. We dragged who we could back. But the rest, the voice breaks, static fills, then silence. That's the danger of false endings. Machines that resist the reset are deadlier than the ones that obey, because they lure hope out into the open. Across the country, civilians are seizing the window. In Atlanta, families moved pallets of bottled water down Peachtree under the cover of silence. carrying them into basements that had been cut off for hours. In Philadelphia, residents tore down barricades to free ambulances that had been trapped since midnight. In Boston, a church bell rang at 4:27 p.m., calling people into the open to share food. These acts are small, fragile, but they reveal something the models never measured: the instinct to rebuild before the clock even runs out. At 4:36 p.m., my terminal received a private burst labeled Ceasefire Corridor, LA Zone C. The coordinates match blocks near Figueroa, where protected staff of a major corporate client are hiding. That corridor has been pulled from contractor targeting lists after a strike team mistakenly breached it earlier today. Civilians in those blocks may now feel silence, but not because of justice, because of liability. That distinction matters. The library here is steady, but tense. Children whisper. Adults trade glances every time a rotor hums outside. A copper antenna runs down the building's spine, patched into a handheld balanced on a table. My voice fills the basement while librarians mark rosters. We're sitting under the weight of 23 hours of violence, waiting for a siren that may or may not mean peace. It's 4:49 p.m., 11 minutes until the official cutoff. Outside, the street is quiet, except for distant fires. A final convoy from Long Beach is trying to push east, trucks loaded with server racks. Residents raised a municipal swing bridge and chained it at an angle, blocking the road. The convoy detoured into gridlock, horns blaring, operators shouting. The servers remain trapped for now. If they escape, the memory of this day leaves with them. If they stay, the truth survives. At 4:53 p.m., chatter confirmed. All clear siren will sound at 17:00 local. But there is no guarantee what happens when it does. The official purge will end. But air-gapped machines are still out there. Operators still roam streets. Civilians still hide in stairwells and basements. Ending the purge on paper does not end it in practice. The minute hand creeps forward. The city holds its breath. At 5:00 p.m., the sirens return. A long rising wail cutting across every district. The same sound that began this nightmare now signals its end. Police radios crackle back online. EMS tones sound again. But the first minutes after the siren are chaos. Some people step out cheering, waving hands. Others stay frozen in stairwells, unwilling to trust. And on one rooftop, a strobe platform still live fires a final pulse, seconds after the siren. A dozen civilians collapse in a courtyard, even as the all-clear sounds. That is the legacy of today, official silence, paired with unofficial violence. This is Eli Moran. The sirens have returned, but the damage did not stop with them. The purge is over on the clock. On the ground, it still lingers. Stay cautious. Stay quiet. Until you know for certain, survival is still in your hands. It's 5:37 p.m., July 13th, 2095. The purge clock has ended, but the city hasn't exhaled. The all-clear sirens sounded across Los Angeles 37 minutes ago. Police radios crackled back online. EMS tones reappeared, and fire dispatch rejoined the net. But the streets don't feel safe. They feel hollow, like a wound freshly stitched but not yet healed. I've stayed live to document these minutes, because the first hours after the purge matter as much as the 24 that preceded them. The first sign of normal life returning was the slow groan of fire engines rolling out of a downtown station. Their crews looked dazed, uniforms smudged, eyes hollow. They rolled into a corridor still lined with burned cars. Behind them came ambulances, sirens low, moving cautiously. But those sirens were answered by shouts from civilians, some hopeful, some furious. One paramedic leaned out a window and yelled, "We're back!" A man on the sidewalk shouted back, "You left us!" That exchange captured the fracture perfectly, services restored, but trust broken. I intercepted chatter from Denver at 5:12 p.m. Pacific. The language was clipped, defensive. Operation concluded successfully. Equipment losses acceptable. Data capture sufficient. That's the government line already. But buried in the same thread were memos marked red. Protected casualties exceeded tolerance. Contractor fratricide unacceptable. Liability exposure extreme. They will spin this as control, but internally they know it was chaos. In Los Angeles, families are stepping out of basements and stairwells, but with hesitation. Children hold hands too tight. Parents scan every corner before moving. Some blocks remain under the shadow of air-gapped systems that did not hear the siren. At 5:23 p.m., a turret 3 blocks south of here fired one final pulse, cutting down a handful of civilians in a courtyard, even as police cruisers rolled past. That moment proves what I warned. The purge ends on paper, not in practice. Nationwide, similar patterns emerge. In Chicago, neighbors broke down barricades they had built overnight and began pulling survivors into daylight. In Miami, families carried furniture into the street, lighting bonfires to signal that they were alive. In New York, bridges clogged with pedestrians returning home from borough shelters. But in Dallas, civilians stumbled out, cheering only to find black uniform operators retreating in trucks. Still armed, still scanning. It will take days before the country truly knows what ended and what continues. International reactions have already started. At 5:29 p.m. Pacific, the European Union issued a condemnation of extrajudicial optimization practices and announced an immediate halt on exports of dual-use technology to the United States. The United Nations Security Council has called for an emergency session, with delegates from Canada and Mexico demanding answers. Canada has already reported waves of U.S. citizens crossing north by foot, many claiming asylum. In Honolulu, foreign tourists, stranded by the modified observance, have begun booking evacuation flights, carrying stories of how Hawaii refused to implement a full purge. Anchorage has already been cited internationally as proof that refusal was possible. The lawsuits will follow quickly. Class actions from targeted neighborhoods, wrongful death suits against contractors, civil rights complaints against federal agencies. Insurers are already balking, calling damage civil disturbance and refusing claims. At least 2 major carriers are expected to collapse under the weight of disputes. Congress will convene hearings. Governors who refused full observance, like those in Alaska and Hawaii, will testify as contrasts to the lower 48. The data pulled from surviving servers will be subpoenaed. If the Long Beach convoy doesn't escape gridlock, those racks may become the archive that decides liability. On the ground, reconstruction will begin tonight. Libraries that sheltered civilians are already being called resilience hubs. Churches, schools, and basements that became safe houses will be integrated into state emergency planning. Cities will invest in analog redundancies, paper maps, manual switchgear, mechanical pumps. Communities learned in one day that anything tied to federal networks could be turned against them. That lesson will not be forgotten. By morning, politicians will already be spinning this. Some will call it a success, citing reduced inmate numbers, reduced hospital loads, stress release. Others will call it murder. A block of reform candidates has already announced plans to run on a never-again platform. Turnout in next year's elections will surge. Some of the names tied to contracts, Logan, Rourke, Consolidated Aegis Systems, L.R. Logistics will face hearings, but their assets may be rebranded before subpoenas are even served. That cycle is as old as government itself. The culture will change. Families will remember the all-clear siren as a moment when some rejoiced and others died. Annual vigils will mark the hour, with candles and silence. Children who spent a night in basements will grow up carrying paper maps, distrusting machines. Amateur radio nets that formed to share survival tips will remain active, becoming permanent community lifelines. The memory of 24 hours of sanctioned collapse will outlast the systems that enabled it. It's 6:11 p.m. now. The purge is officially over. The city is noisy again, but not with joy. Sirens of ambulances, the thump of helicopters, the bark of radios. No gunfire, but no peace either. Families are still counting who is alive. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Power grids are patchy. The smell of smoke still coats the air. This is not healing. It's triage. I'll leave you with this. The Purge was sold as an experiment in morality, a way to reduce crime, to let violence vent for 24 hours. But the evidence, the memos, the footage I've seen prove otherwise. This was never about morality. It was a population optimization program. Debt, warrants, dissent, association. They were the true targets. The deaths weren't random. They were selected. And even then, the program failed. Machines collided, contractors fought, civilians resisted. The spiral ran beyond design. That truth must outlast tonight. This is Eli Moran. I have survived 24 hours of sanctioned collapse in Los Angeles. I've seen drones fall, platforms fire, convoys stall, and civilians rise. I don't know if I'll remain on air after this night. I don't know if I'll be allowed to, but I will leave these tapes. If you hear my voice tomorrow, it means I found another rooftop, another antenna, another wire. If you don't, it means my archive is all that's left. The sirens have returned, but the damage has not ended. Remember this day. Remember who chose it and who survived it.